Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host, and I'm joined by the film encyclopedia man, Boaz Dix. We are a couple of filmmakers on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode we pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on VOD. Myself and Boaz pick our favourite film from that topic, or team up against a guest and battle it out to decide which film will become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 2. Hello guys, welcome back to part 2 of the podcast, talking Scorsese movies, and of course this is the part where I have a look at your Instagram responses for the previous episode, what your picks were, and obviously last time out was a Legends episode and we were talking about Rob Reiner films, and we had a couple of responses. Sam from One of Us is Bored, now a regular responder, went with The Princess Bride, and Matt from the Matt and Mark movie show went with Spinal Tap, and those were the 2 films we talked about as well, so great choices. I'm curious, guys, what is your Rob Reiner movie of choice?
I have to say Princess Bride also.
Man.
Yeah.
It's just too good.
Dustin?
I want to go against the grain just on principle, but I can't. Princess Bride is arguably one of the most enjoyable films I think we've been given. I don't know anyone that can watch that movie and not be smiling ear to ear by the time it ends. So Princess Bride.
Yeah, it's one of those perfect movies I wouldn't change anything about.
Didn't win though.
Lame.
Well,
this is Spinal Tap one. Yeah, my guest Chase from the Movie Gap really loved that movie. There was a lot of 9.8s flying around. So I was like, woo, okay, fair enough.
Hey, Spinal Tap is awesome.
Yeah.
That movie set the tone for mockumentary filmmaking, so you can't deny it's incredible.
Yeah.
So your choice then, guys, for Martin Scorsese films, what is your choice?
Went with The Departed.
The Departed.
Departed.
That's all we're going to say now. The Departed.
Departed. I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a hard choice. Like I said, we very heavily considered Goodfellas. That's, I think everybody does and everybody should. Yeah. Also heavily considered Casino because we both feel it's criminally underrated and kind of lost in his list. It's very good, just as good as all of those. And Shutter Island we love as well. We've done an episode on it, so kind of wanted to do something new. And I love The Departed.
Yeah, I think Shutter Island is very underrated as well. I do love that movie of what it's saying about the human condition and things like that. So
and kind of different for Scorsese, being a little more fantasy, and visually is very, very interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what happens in The Departed?
You wanted to try it again, didn't you?
Dustin, you give a synopsis of The Departed.
I'm going to give the synopsis of Departed without trying to sound like too synopsis-y. To me, Departed is just how easily institutions can be infiltrated or corrupted from the system inside and outside influences, focusing on 2 different points of views of the law, one being the corrupted side and the other being kind of genuine but lost, with DiCaprio's performance. And at the helm of it is Frank Costello, played by Jack Nicholson, who's kind of puppet mastering everything that's going on within all the city of Boston, Massachusetts. So you got modernized gangster films, and I think that's what kind of makes Departed so great.
Yeah, I think initial reactions for me, I really love this film as well. I wouldn't say, obviously, I think we're probably all in agreement it's not his best gangster film. I'd probably put Casino and Goodfellas above this one. And obviously it is a remake of Infernal Affairs, but I haven't seen that, so I don't really have a reference point of which is the better movie. But normally people would say Infernal Affairs is the better film. But that I've heard talk about the 2 movies. So yeah, I still really enjoy it. all the characters are really great, and that end is wow. That's some end to a movie. That last 10 minutes,
Yes, it is.
which we all get into for sure. Initial reactions, guys. Jake, what did you make of this one the first time you saw it?
I remember loving it instantly. It's a movie I watched quite a bit of his. I would definitely put it in the top 3, maybe even top 2 of Scorsese's movies. I like it a lot.
Okay.
And there's not much I would change about it at all. I think it does everything really, really well, and the performances and everything's great.
Did Dustin have a choice in the matter of what you picked, or
we conferred a little bit?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we conferred. Yeah, we really like what Jake said earlier. I mean, we really wanted, well, obviously we're doing Goodfellas, but we both felt it's so obvious, and what more can you say about Goodfellas that hasn't already been said?
Yeah.
And then Casino was up there too, just because people need to give Casino its due. Like it's a great movie, and especially for organized crime style, it shows kind of a wider picture of just how far organized crime kind of has its fingers in popular institutions, especially back then. But The Departed, yeah, I'm with Jake. First time I saw it in the theater, I was just kind of blown away from the get-go at that movie with Nicholson's opening dialogue, the opening video footage of the fights in the streets of Boston. Just kind of setting the tone with you kind of have to fight and make your own way through any means necessary to make it through life, especially in that city, in that situation. But shockingly, there's a lot in it that you're like, oh, I could apply this. And I think that's where like it does a great job of blurring what's good and what's wrong.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like you got to be a little questionable sometimes, which is not a good feeling. But yeah, I was blown away with it immediately.
I like the choice to set it in South Boston with an Irish gang. It's different from the original source material, obviously, and then also different for Scorsese, who's famous for his Italian mob movies. It would have been easy to make another one like that with the same sort of adaptation, but to set it in South Boston, to give it this kind of Irish immigrant descendants life story, I think adds so much to the style and the gruffness of the characters.
Is this in your like top 3 or 2, Dustin, as well? Or?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah,
okay.
It's up there for me. It's one of those movies, man, where after I saw it, that first time in the theater when it came out, I was one of those guys that just wouldn't shut up about it. I told everyone about it. Was trying to convince everyone around me to go and see. I tend to be that guy with most movies that I enjoy. But this one just felt like, especially because I was married at the time when it came out, and my wife never enjoyed gangster movies. She didn't like that kind of style. She didn't care for it. But this movie, she really loved.
Cool.
And so to me, it was just kind of telling of like the accessibility of The Departed for being so hyper violent throughout the film.
Yeah.
And with dialogue that will turn people off. I think it was incredible how accessible to a wider audience Departed really could be, and ultimately kind of get people to like go back and revisit like Goodfellas if they've never seen it, or just revisit it if you haven't watched it forever, and just kind of have a new appreciation for that kind of storytelling.
Yeah.
I think that's why The Departed is so great to me, is because it just opens everything up for people, kind of gives them a wider view.
Interesting.
I would agree.
So directing then, like the opening scenes in this film is really interesting, where I'm not sure it's entirely successful, but where like Jack Nicholson's character, like Frank Costello, is shrouded in shadow to create this like mystique for his character and for the young Colin Sullivan. Sometimes the lighting does feel a little unnatural and a little fake to me. And like the shot on Costello and French after like he kills those 2 people on the beach look quite ugly a little bit. So I like the idea, but like sometimes it didn't look right. Also, we know what Jack Nicholson looks like, so there's no like scars on his face that they're hiding. So it's a little questionable opening for me, but the jump cut to like Matt Damon after what Nicholson has been saying was great, where he says like, when I was your age, I cannot do it. They would say we could become cops or criminals.
You tried it.
Today, what I'm saying is this. When we're facing a loaded gun, what's the difference? That's my boy. So yeah, I think like I really like the real documentary footage they start off the film with, but I don't know. I don't really know why they went with this whole idea of putting Nicholson in shadow at the start.
The only thing I can figure is that it has to do with how he's just kind of he's obviously in the shadows as the kingpin of this underground business, basically. And he's also kind of a mystical figure, kind of a father figure to Colin, and it kind of comes out and plucks him out of poverty or obscurity just as a kid and raises him up to be what he becomes is entirely because of his influence. So I think it's not obviously a mystery because it's Jack Nicholson and everybody in the world knows his voice, but there's a little bit of nefariousness or darkness to him for sure. A lot, I would say, actually.
Hey, I'm James Lovino, and I'm here to tell you about Alternate Sides, a movie podcast with a twist. I've worked in the film business for 2 decades, but I haven't actually seen that many movies, and this has been driving my frequent collaborator, Sam, a self-confessed film snob, crazy. So every week, while he's stuck in his car trying to avoid getting a parking ticket, thanks to New York City's alternate side parking regulations, we discuss a classic film I've finally just gotten around to seeing. Alternate Sides, a new podcast about movies, parking, and a 25-year friendship, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say I've never taken that lighting decision to be, we want to keep him hid because the audience, doesn't know what Nicholson looks like or whatever, or to hide any disfigurement. I've always taken it as he's just always in the dark, actually influencing. He's just, he's not a good person. So he is kind of the darkness in South Boston. And his influence is pretty incredible as you learn throughout the course of the film. So yeah, I always took that opening as just, he's a villain, and villains are dark, and he's right there.
Yeah, he's not a friendly guy coming over to help him out.
No.
Right.
Yeah, I get like the symbolism of it, but I just feel like me criticizing Scorsese, but it just didn't feel right really with the effects, because I feel like there is some effects work in there. But there we go.
Yeah, sure.
Like the way Martin Scorsese handles like the violence in this film is always kind of softened a bit with like humor and music for me. Like nearly every time like French or DiCaprio beats someone up, like the music is playing and they're always trying to make it funny. Like when French is beating someone up, DiCaprio sees like the other guy reaching for inside his jacket pocket and he knocks his teeth out, and French is like, what are you doing? He was just reaching for his cigarettes, which is kind of funny and creates some character for French as well. Ray Winston is great in this film, I think.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're doing violence wrong. He's even like,
right.
There's even a scene where a guy like throws a toy duck at DiCaprio's head. I mean, what are you supposed to do with that but laugh, And even like a simple conversation with Jack Nicholson and DiCaprio, Scorsese has Nicholson hold a like severed hand, like a paperweight. And you're like, wow, this guy is quite the psycho and is used to violence and gore like it's part of his morning routine. So I liked how like Scorsese portrays violence as a very normal thing in this very dark world.
Yeah. That's actually one of my favorite things about this movie is that kind of violence is such a normal thing for Frank and all the guys that work for him, that they don't see it as anything other than just another day at the office.
Just business.
And so they're going to make jokes about it. They're going to kind of see it in a different light. I think that's one of the great things about DiCaprio's character is he always looks like so distressed in every situation he's in throughout the course of the movie, because this is not every day at the office, but it is for him. You know, he's undercover trying to be this version, but he knows every time, like, everything he does as this undercover agent is wrong. It's a felony.
Yeah.
Like, you are committing actual crimes.
Yeah.
I like that kind of conflict between all that stuff. I like the happier music while they're being extremely violent because of the idea that it's so normal to them that you as the audience are, I kind of always took it as you're kind of supposed to be put off a little bit by it because you know it's not right.
Yeah, it's not portrayed as like a very serious, dramatic, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this thing kind of thing. It's normal for them. It's some of the violence is kind of more of an action movie or they themselves feel like they're in an action movie as like these badasses who are just going around beating up mobsters. And the breakfast scene is one of the best, where the audience is in the seat with DiCaprio as he's like, this is very uncomfortable. Not only am I wearing a wire and undercover, and this very powerful gangster has a severed hand as he's eating breakfast in a leopard bathrobe, and he looks so relaxed.
And like leaves the blood on his fingers as he's like still eating food.
You like expect him to start licking his fingers. He's unhinged.
Like, that is not ketchup, dude.
Right. It's not how you season food, damn it.
I sure hope not.
Yeah, it's interesting how like Scorsese used music in this film as well, because sometimes, well, a lot of the time he would just cut it off like straight away to like highlight a particular moment in the film, and he does that with the violence as well. Like, as soon as it stops or something, or we cut to a different character, the music just stops, and it's done for a dramatic value and like comedy value as well. I feel like,
yeah, the music is great, and I love the original Howard Shore stuff, and I also love how much popular music is in it, and kind of period older stuff, and then every time they play Shipping Up to Boston by the Dropkick Murphys in the opening title, I just get hyped.
Oh yeah,
it's too perfect for this movie.
That is awesome.
Yeah. I really liked the cat and mouse chase scene between Matt Damon and Leo DiCaprio after they leave that porn theater. Porn theaters again.
More with the porn.
The film has been like really slick, and this scene like epitomizes that. Like, Scorsese uses like great slow-mo when like Damon turns around and sees DiCaprio coming, and there's some great like blurring effects in slow-mo too, just before DiCaprio nearly gets hit by a car and loses him for a moment, before you have that clever shot where like DiCaprio sees Damon in that like Chinese mirror thing. Then you've got like the two characters' shadows on the wall before DiCaprio's phone goes off and they both scramble. Then you have like the great suspense of Damon stabbing the wrong guy, and Scorsese uses like really fast cutting on the same shot that pushes in on DiCaprio's face, and then again like on the security camera that catches Damon. So I feel like Scorsese is really being creative and using everything at his disposal to make this scene as slick as possible. Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, I think it's also great. I get heavy influences from like 40s and 50s noir, detective noir, like following this guy and trying to not get detected, and he knows he's being followed but he can't quite get a glimpse, and it's very intense.
I love the way that I'm glad you brought this scene in particular up. It's one of my favorite sequences of the whole movie, because you're rooting so hard for DiCaprio, because from the moment that he drowns his wire, he's like, I need to get out. And this is he comes so close to like, if I can just pinpoint the mole, I can actually call it a day on this. And so you're rooting for him from the get-go, and you're rooting for him that he's so close. One of my favorite things that decision-wise from Scorsese is dropping so much sound when it comes right after the phone rings, where it's just that quiet. They're both knowing how close it is to an ending, different kinds of endings for either character. And then you hear the footsteps coming down, and you see Damon ready with the knife, and you're like, I mean, first time you watch this movie, you're thinking like, they're not going to take DiCaprio out, are they? But he does such a great job of building the tension and the suspense. And I love the close-ups of both of their faces because they both look so panicked.
Yeah.
Terrified, yeah.
They understand that like this really could be the ending, whether they're both going to die or someone's whole life path is now finished. So I think it's one of the best sequences in the movie, and Scorsese's decision on how he filmed it and how it ended up being pieced together, I think highlights that movie.
Is that your favorite scene, or?
It's one of them. Yeah.
Have you got another one?
I do. I have several for this movie, but that scene in the alley is a highlight. My personal favorite would actually be the rat conversation between DiCaprio and Nicholson.
Yeah.
I think that conversation is so unhinged and just at such a boiling point that DiCaprio has to like, he's failing essentially to maintain his calm, but he's saying the right things. And Nicholson is constantly calm. And it's just, that's my favorite scene in the movie. It's my favorite conversation in the movie. It's all around awesome.
Jake, favorite scene or shot for you?
I have a lot as well. I think there's a couple of really interesting camera work things that Scorsese does. One is right before in the office with Alec Baldwin and Mark Wahlberg, when they are right before the maybe not maybe fuck yourself scene. He does this like sweeping motion where they're both in frame, and then sweeps it around, and it's just on Mark Wahlberg, and then does the exact same thing for Alec Baldwin, sweeps it around. It's different enough that it draws you in, but also kind of stands out. My favorite shot, though, again, probably favorite frame, is at the end when Mark Wahlberg's leaving the apartment, and you have the groceries on the ground the camera's on the ground with Matt Damon's body, and you see how the groceries in the foreground, Matt Damon's body is bleeding out in the middle ground, and then blood on the door and the hallway behind him as Mark Wahlberg's character leaves. It's just, it stands out and is like a frameable shot.
Yeah.
And obviously that, I don't know what you would call that building with the golden dome, a church that's kind of like referenced quite a few times. Yeah.
It's I think that's the state capitol.
Probably.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah. With the rat going across, which I've always loved that, of like kind of the reminder of the corruption. You know, there's always rats in everything.
Yeah.
Dirty rat.
Yeah.
I think for me, my favorite shot is Martin Sheen's death.
Yeah.
Because I think like Scorsese is just a master at subverting your expectations of what you think you're going to see. And I love the scene where like Matt Damon tries to catch the rat DiCaprio in Costello's crew by following Captain Queenan. So Damon lets Costello's crew know that the rat is meeting with Queenan right now, and Delahunt wonders where DiCaprio is. So DiCaprio escapes down the fire escape, and Costello's crew catches Queenan. You know, they rough him up a bit. Then it's where like Scorsese like mixes things up a bit and cuts to DiCaprio at street level. Then we have like a silent shot of Queen and Martin Sheen like falling through the air in slow-mo, and then Queenan like lands right in front of DiCaprio in normal speed with blood splatting everywhere, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yes.
You know. Scorsese completely skips the classic guys threatening to throw someone off a roof scene and just goes straight to the guy going splat on the ground. Like, just so bold from Scorsese for me.
Yeah, and that scene is so like climactic that in my mind, I'm like, that has to be towards the end of the movie, and it's like in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, there's still a good like hour to go. I think 45 minutes or something.
Yeah. Well, and after you've seen it, like that first time seeing it, you don't realize that's kind of your big foreshadow of like death scenes in this movie aren't going to really be drawn out. This is going to go quick. It's going to be not what you're expecting. So Queenan's death to me is always the big foreshadow of like, it's going to be a little different this time around. And I think that's one of the great decisions from Scorsese on how he approached getting the story told.
Directing score for me for The Departed, I think it's really great still. He's at the height of his powers, I think, in this film in terms of his gangster films, in terms of how he's telling this story. Again, like subverting expectations on particular scenes and just keeping it simple where he needs to keep it simple. So I think I'll go with like an 8.8 for me.
Okay. Very high.
All right.
Very high for me as well. I feel like
Yeah.
I agree. Scorsese is kind of at his peak with The Departed, and he's learned everything from Goodfellas and Casino and it brings it forward and improves upon it. Does a lot of different things that makes it so rewatchable. Makes a lot of references to classic, like the original 1932 Scarface and stuff. So I would put The Departed probably like a 9.3, I think.
Dustin?
Yeah, I'm way up there as well. I think one, it being such a accessible film, like I talked about earlier, but Scorsese behind the camera, this movie feels like he had the most fun. Like he was enjoying just the process of making this movie just as much as everyone. And I'm a sucker for when you can actually feel like everyone a part of the project is just enjoying what they're doing. It heightens the film. I've always kind of had that sense with this. So I'm like at a 9.5 just because Scorsese made such a great film for like so many different kinds of audiences. Like it's not just for one demographic. So many people can do it, and he pulled it off. So it's very high for me because I think this is him actually mastering his craft. Yeah. So I'm pretty high on that one.
Yeah, I would agree.
9.4 then?
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
Right, screenplay then. I think the film like sets up like the moles pretty quickly for like Matt Damon and Leo DiCaprio, and throughout that and into the first 30 minutes, like the film has some real dark humor to it. that it's nearly like too funny that it almost distracts you from what's happening in the story. And because it's really slick and fast paced, you nearly miss some of the plot stuff for me because I'm laughing too much. It's more focused on setting up the characters first with some plot in there, but it's just a really interesting tone that the film goes for here at the start, where we have your gangster thriller elements with some really dark humor in equal measure, I would say.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've seen I think Matt Damon talk about his experience with this movie, and with especially how like Frank Costello's character, he improvises some stuff, and he's described that being a great writer is a good part of being a good actor. And so when he's on the beach and he just needs to shoot those dudes, the dude and the lady, and he just says that he felt funny. It's just something that he's adding to make Costello feel like a different or more interesting character than is even on the page.
Yeah.
Just even more psycho, really.
Right.
Yeah, just even more like he doesn't view these acts as anything other than what we said earlier. It's normal for him, and that makes him just so much more evil, if you will. So yeah, I think Frank Costello stands out very much in terms of how this character was written and developed by Nicholson and Scorsese and everyone. Yeah, it's so good.
I think Martin Scorsese has always been more interested in like his characters than plot in pretty much most of his films, and I think in this film it's no different, in my opinion, because after he establishes where each character is in play, like the film goes through a series of scenes where each mole, Damon and DiCaprio help out their respective groups, the criminals and the cops. Like Damon helps Jack Nicholson avoid the cops, and DiCaprio tells Martin Sheen what Costello's next move is going to be. And then they start to suspect that they've got a mole in each other's group. So it feels like a constant cycle, which helps elevate like the main funny character stuff to come through. Then with all that, you have like the scenes of almost random acts of violence from Ray Winston and DiCaprio, which has very little to do with the main story, I would say. But then all of a sudden in one of these scenes, like DiCaprio is beating a guy up who's high and reveals that Costello is a protected FBI informant. So you're like, hang on, the cops are never going to win this. So the rest of the film, it's like the plot doesn't matter really anymore. You're just watching these characters destroy each other, and you just want to find out which mole is going to get caught, because catching Costello doesn't matter anymore so much. He's either going to die or it's business as usual for Costello.
I think that's one of the interesting things about that movie when you find out that Costello's an informant is, at least for me, you really understand like, wow, every decision all these guys are making, no matter what they're doing, Costello's words from the very beginning are like, they're true. What does it matter? There's always a loaded gun pointed at him. So what difference does it make? That it's all, there's every line is blurred.
What's the difference?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that The Departed really kind of comes down to a movie of just very poor decision making, and it's all done like reactionary. There's very little decision making to be proactive. And when they do try to be proactive, you know, a guy forgets to or doesn't have time to put cameras up in a certain spot of the warehouse, so there's blind spots. So he's going to get sucker punched, which is one of the funniest scenes in the movie.
Yeah, it's also a movie that's like, it starts out as being corruption versus honest police work, but then it evolves into being corruption versus official corruption.
Right.
They can't win, like you said, that the government actually sanctioned their corruption, and he's an informant, and he's allowed to continue to do his operations so that they can catch bigger fish or whatever. And so I guess it's just an indicator of how deep the corruption goes in the system, and that, or how futile the efforts are to stop it, or that their police work doesn't really matter, or they can't do anything about it.
It's not there to make you feel good.
Yeah, it's definitely a story that allows Scorsese to focus on what he wants to focus on, and that's just the characters and just how they can fuck with each other.
Oh, yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, the characters are amazing. I love how the characters are opposites of each other, that the actual cop, Sullivan, is kind of allowed to be the golden boy, even though he's the corrupt mole in the police force, and gets promoted and gets a nice apartment overlooking the Capitol, and he gets a girlfriend and he gets a nice life, like the corruption pays. And then you have the actual cop who gets kicked out of the Stadies and goes to prison for a year and needs to get undercover and figure out how to get into this dangerous organization by beating up some dudes. And it's a great, I really, really like how it kind of mirrors them off of each other.
Yeah. The parallels are fantastic in this movie.
I think after Queenan dies, DiCaprio's on his own practically. He's got like no one other than like the psychologist Vera Farmiga's character. So when Queenan's phone rings, he's like, "What? Who can that be?" He picks up the phone, and it's Matt Damon's character on the other end of the phone, and they don't say anything to each other. So for me, that's quite a strong indicator for DiCaprio that the guy on the other end of the phone is the mole in the state police. But he calls him again anyway, and Matt Damon's like, "You need to come in." And in DiCaprio's head, he must be like, Queenan would never say that, I wouldn't think. So then when he texts that phone again, knowing that the rat has to be the guy that's got the phone now, that they're going to the next drug deal, this is where it is or whatever. And at this point, DiCaprio's got like nothing to lose. So I think he realizes that we're approaching the end game now. And it's quite a stretch for him to do that. But I think it just shows DiCaprio's desperation. So then when we have like the scene where DiCaprio meets Matt Damon and he sees the Citizen's envelope, he's really shocked and it's directed like a very like dramatic moment. But I was like, surely he knows that Matt Damon is the rat by the phone call where nobody speaks. So, and then obviously he hears his voice. He tells him who he is, Matt Damon. So if they just cut that scene out, like the reveal of DiCaprio seeing the Citizen's envelope would have worked a lot better for me. I mean, am I missing something, or like with that scene, or because it just didn't feel? I felt like surely DiCaprio's character isn't that dumb.
I wouldn't say he's dumb. I would say when it's silent on the phone, I think DiCaprio's character is very aware that it's probably the mole on the other end.
Yeah.
But like I said, this whole movie is poor decision making by these characters, and he's so desperate that I think he just tries to give, like, Dingham's gone. He has literally no one.
Yeah.
And he wants out.
So he kind of is forced to, like, kind of come in and work with Sullivan a little bit. But he's his whole demeanor in the office, you can tell he's heightened because he knows there's a mole. He knows he's probably in danger, and he's probably not going to make it very far. That's why he's so like, I just need to get my money and my identity. I need it back. I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
He's not any safer than he is in Costello's office.
Yeah. And I think when he sees the envelope, his realization isn't, to me, it's not so much, oh, Sullivan's the mole. To me, it's more of the realization of confirming he should have ran when he actually first intended to. Because to me, it's just like, yep, hindsight is biting me in the ass real bad right now. So I don't take that as the realization that Sullivan's the mole. I take that as his realization of he's made, like, possibly the biggest mistake that he's made up to that point. Obviously, his biggest mistake is trying to confront him on the rooftop, but that comes in a minute.
And I think he feels extremely vulnerable because he has been in this organized crime for a while. He's been to prison. He's been committing these felonies. And all it takes is somebody on the inside deleting his undercover status, which very few people even know about. So he doesn't have any help. And then he's fucked for life, basically. So he feels so vulnerable, I think, in all those situations.
And I feel like he doesn't have much of a choice as well. He's like, well, if I'm going to get out, like, I have to call whoever's on the end of the phone to, like, get my identity back, my money.
Yeah, needs a lifeline.
So, yeah, I think it makes more sense like that. Yeah.
So does that kind of help you with that scene then, of, like, kind of seeing it from a different point?
I think it's interesting that, like, Scorsese, like, portrays that scene of DiCaprio seeing the envelope, like, as a very dramatic moment. And I think for me, maybe if that was a little bit more subtle, or if we knew, maybe have some sort of indicator that he thinks it could be Matt Damon Sullivan, then maybe that would have worked a little bit better. I'm not sure, but yeah, you guys have explained it a little bit more for me.
I think it also could be, going back to the accessible nature of the movie, people that aren't in the minds of the characters as deeply and aren't thinking of how does Costigan, DiCaprio's character, feel when he answers that phone and he hears silence on the other line. Like, sometimes you're just caught up in the tension of the moment and you're thinking, seeing both sides of it. For people that aren't caught up, that envelope is helpful to be like, oh, I have seen that travel from the bar in Costello's office all the way to the police station, and that's a direct line of that corruption, of that control. And so it's a good reminder of what DiCaprio's character is involved in.
Yeah, definitely. I think throughout most of the film and in most cop thrillers, you usually root for the cop characters. And in this case, it's Billy Costigan, DiCaprio. So when, after both rats know who each other, like, really is, you're expecting DiCaprio to arrest Matt Damon on the roof and bring him in, as he's got loads of audio evidence. So when they're coming down the elevator and then all of a sudden our main character gets capped right in the head by James Badge Dale, a second mole for Costello, and you're like, what the fuck?
I'm pretty sure I said that out loud that first time I saw it.
Yeah. Then he kills, like, Anthony Anderson. Then Matt Damon's like, I'm not trusting anyone, and he kills James Badge Dale. So you're left with the bad guy, Matt Damon's character, and then during, like, the funeral, you're like, he's going to get away with this. What the hell? Then when Matt Damon's going back to his apartment with groceries, I was like, why are we seeing this kind of boring scene in a very fast-paced, like, really slick movie? Then of course, the one character that's gone missing comes back, in Mark Wahlberg's character and kills Matt
Mhm.
Damon. So I loved how the end is so unexpected. And yet when you think about it in this world, it could only end with every main character getting killed anyway.
Yeah, very dangerous life.
Yeah. The one complaint that I've like heard from people about this movie has been the final act of the film. People have told me they don't like how quick paced all the headshots are and how many people die just in rapid fire.
Really?
I've always kind of argued that because I'm like, I think it's brilliant. I think because most death scenes, especially for major characters, is always drawn out very long to, pull out as much emotion from the audience. This one completely is like, we're abandoning that style or that idea. We need it quick. We need it abrupt. It has to, the violence starts and ends immediately so that we can move on. And it does. I like that it makes you kind of bummed out that Damon's like last man standing until you remember Wahlberg. But even Wahlberg kind of goes villain at the end. Technically, I mean, he's like completely
vigilante
prepped for hitman status, and he does it. And
I mean, that guy is pretty unhinged as well. Like
he's super unhinged, so you're not shocked.
Every other word is like "fuck," or
you're not shocked. It might be the one scene that you really are excited for Wahlberg because he plays such an asshole throughout the whole course of the movie. But I've always like kind of been shocked when people complain about the ending. Because to me, I'm like, how else were you going to end this movie? It's not the kind of story to have a happy ending. Like, it's bad decision making.
It just wouldn't be satisfying.
It wouldn't. Yeah. I think it would have felt like a cop out had it ended any other way.
I think the abrupt and sudden deaths also add to it validates the tension that you have earlier in the film that what they're doing is extremely dangerous and anything bad could happen at any given moment. It just makes it so realistic and that the tension you felt of somebody suddenly getting whacked when they're at breakfast or whatever was valid, that it definitely could have happened and still could have happened.
Yeah. I mean, really, we should see it coming. I mean, that elevator ride coming down is pretty quick. Normally you would like see the characters go in and then the next shot is them coming out of the elevator at the ground floor, but we're in that elevator for a long time. And, a few scenes before, like an hour before, we see Martin Sheen get splatted, like really suddenly. So I'm like, it shouldn't really come as a surprise.
Going up multiple stories never goes well in this movie.
Down the ground, people.
And, just don't join organized crime syndicates. That's kind of like, let's avoid that.
That's the first step.
That's a good first step right there.
Big red flag. So funny lines, people, there are a lot of them. You finish the police course and you get taken care of again, baby. So after graduation, I get a blowjob again. That's great. Your mother must have been a wonderful woman. Go fuck yourself.
Pretty much anything that Nicholson's character says throughout the movie is either funny or interesting or very menacing. So I had the hardest time trying to figure out like what line is my favorite line. Because I just, every time he talks, I'm like, this is brilliant. I just love all of his dialogue. But it comes down to that rat scene, the conversation for me. And I'm actually going to give it to DiCaprio, where he's telling Frank, the question shouldn't be, or the question you should be asking yourself is, who thinks they can do what I do? And Frank asks, like, well, what about you? You think you can be me? And he straight up says, like, yeah, Frank, I think I can be you, but I don't want to be you. It's like the first time Costigan is able to actually be honest in this whole undercover world. And the delivery of the line, and that line in general, I just really enjoy that line. I think it's an intense moment between those two characters, and it's such a boiling point. So that line I'm going to give kind of the edge just because of how it's delivered during that conversation.
Yeah, I think that conversation is fantastic, and just the parallels between Costigan and Costello. Most of Costello's crew are below average intelligence gangster dudes, just muscle. But I think that Costello recognizes in Costigan that he is smarter than average, and kind of sees himself in it. And so sees himself in Costigan as someone who could come up and take over for him. And so he plays kind of more of a father figure to him in a way, like he also does with Sullivan. They're kind of two competing brothers in a weird way.
Yeah,
I definitely agree. I think my favorite line of the movie, which basically sets up the whole thing, is from Queenan, Martin Sheen's character, when he asks him, and when he's recruiting him, and he asks, do you want to be a cop or do you want to appear to be a cop? Because a lot of guys want to appear to be cops. That's the whole point of the movie, and it's delivered so well that you could actually be a cop and do real police work, but you're going to have to go to prison and be in very real danger. It's very easy to just be a cop, or rather appear to be a cop, because you get a very nice, cushy life, which is what Sullivan is doing. And it also crosses over, I think, into Vera Farmiga's character and the relationship with her. One of them is just keeping up appearances, wants a nice relationship, wants a wife to get promoted and all of this stuff. And one of them actually has a sincere, honest relationship with her, and that she connects with. There's the difference between facade and reality for both of them.
But certainly in terms of lines, like, I love Ray Winston in this, where he says near the start, DiCaprio like crunches a whiskey glass on someone's head, and he says, well, I'm the guy that tells you there are guys you can hit and there's guys you can't. Now, that's not quite a guy you can hit, but almost a guy you can't hit. So I'm going to make a fucking ruling on this right now. You don't fucking hit him. You understand? So, yeah, I just love the gangster rules here. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this film can get seriously sweary, with certainly between Alec Baldwin and Mark Wahlberg, like, where they say, unfortunately, this shithole has more fucking leaks than the Iraqi Navy. Fuck yourself. I'm tired of fucking your wife. How's your mother? Good. She's tired of fucking my father. So.
Yeah, the line I have to use most in real life is maybe not, maybe fuck yourself.
Yeah. He may have actually used that line at me a time or two. He may or may not have.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's constant.
I mean, Mark Wahlberg's amazing. Like, just moments later, he's like, maybe not. Maybe fuck yourself. My theory on feds is they're like mushrooms. Feed them shit and keep them in the dark. You girls have a good day.
I love the line when he's at the bar originally and he orders a cranberry juice and someone asks him if he's on his period.
What are you, on your period?
And they get in a fight, and then somebody else later asks him if he's on his period.
Yeah.
Yes, that's hilarious.
Oh, God. Who let this IRA motherfucker in my bar? Just kidding. How's your mother?
On her way out. We all are. Act accordingly. I'm telling you, like, every piece of dialogue from Nicholson in this movie is just, it's gold the whole way through.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Jack Nicholson again, for his own good. Tell Bruce Lee and the Karate Kid, none of us are carrying automatic weapons. Because here in this country, it doesn't add inches to your dick. You get a life sentence for it.
Gold.
But listen to me, son. Don't disappoint me on this. There's some other guy who will be putting their fat dick up little Miss Freud's ass.
You like little miss sucking on your cock?
Don't get your balls in an uproar, Collie. That's Irish pissant. He's so hot for me, we give him a whiff of my ass. He'll crawl right in it. Let's give him a whiff. So great. But I think my favorite is just a real simple one near the start where, like, Jack Nicholson just shoots a woman in the back of her head on the beach. And he just says, geez, she fell funny.
Yeah.
Francis, you should really see somebody.
Yeah, I think that's the moment where you're like, yeah, this guy is deranged.
He's so gone.
Absolutely.
Thought it was real nice of you to ask him which hand he jerked off with.
Oh god.
See, accessible movie and quotable.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, certainly a lot of those lines were in like the first hour. So you're like, there's an insane like tone balance between like, yeah, this is actually supposed to be a gangster thriller, but it's actually fucking hilarious as well.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And then you feel kind of like gross because you're laughing at some of it because you know it really shouldn't be that funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially the cranberry juice stuff, I must say. Oh, God. Screenplay score for me, I think I'll go, I think pretty high still. I think I might just go a solid, like an 8.6, I think.
All right.
Just because I think, like, yes, it's really funny and hilarious, and I know, like, the whole point of it is kind of supposed to be that the story kind of doesn't really matter so much, and it's about these characters just finding out that, you know, that each other's the mole and etc., and how they take each other out. But I think certainly it was only until you guys pointed it out and like explained it a little bit more for me about the whole phone call thing. So I don't know. I think sometimes it gets a little. I think if things were just written slightly more coherently for me, then it might have been a little bit higher. But yeah, I think 8.6 is fair.
All right.
That's still a good score.
A very good score. I think being a remake, an American remake, an adaptation of an existing movie, it's a little less original from that front, even though I haven't seen Infernal Affairs and I don't know if it's better or not. I think that it's incredibly good, even though it's very, very funny. It still lands for me, the tension between the characters and the thrilling aspects of the story. That's all still there as well. So it kind of does everything for me. So I have it pretty high at like a 9.3.
Dustin, higher or lower?
Mine's pretty high. The only real thing that I kind of like is the fact that it is a remake. And like you guys, I haven't seen the original. Slightly lower than Jake's 9.3, but definitely higher than your 8.6. I would go with like an 8.9. I'll do that one. I can totally understand where the humor can kind of overshadow some of the stakes in the story. So I understand that point of view, and it being a remake is always kind of a like, oh yeah, I forgot it's a remake. But it's a damn good remake, even though I haven't seen the original.
One of the best.
But I still think 8.9 is really, really pretty solid. So
all right, we can go with like a 9.1 then, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. 9.1 for the movie Bonerz. Right. Acting then. I had in my notes that scene we've talked about a lot, like where with the rat conversation between DiCaprio and Jack Nicholson. But I think what's really interesting is the fact that, like, you can definitely feel that it's kind of improvised, and it is kind of funny, like, towards the end where, like, Jack Nicholson is... You get that very unhinged feeling from him, because when DiCaprio is kind of challenging him on his views, like, why are you trying to accuse me of being the mole when we know he is, but obviously Jack Nicholson is like, I'm not having that. He gets his gun out, but then he kind of like points it at himself first. He's like, oh, what's this? Oh yeah, it's a gun. And then points at DiCaprio. So you're like, yeah, this guy is still very unhinged. And then when the conversation finishes, like, he's like, go eat something.
Yeah.
And he walks out, but then he comes back again, which feels really improvised. And they just like keep, they kept the camera rolling, and he just comes back and like pretends to be a rat and smells them for a bit, and then does the same line and then leaves. So I'm like, yeah, that's improvised. I love that from Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, watching Nicholson improvise is pretty great.
Yeah, I think he's allowed to improvise a lot. He's obviously a pro and knows exactly what he's doing to add to these characters.
Yeah, so I just love how like Nicholson can go from being quite intimidating to quite psychotic in a funny way in such a short space of time. I liked the sort of interview scene between DiCaprio and Mark Wahlberg and Martin Sheen, like near the start, and Mark Wahlberg is like giving him shit about his family and his life, and DiCaprio is trying really hard to keep his cool, and you can see him bubbling under the surface, and you feel like DiCaprio could lamp him at any time. And obviously later they do have like a brilliant fisticuff moment, and I love that little bit where Mark Wahlberg, after Sheen breaks them up, he has a little smile on his face, like, yeah, I want some, come on, I really need to fight right now. Please fight me.
That's the Southie in them coming out.
Yeah.
Right. I love the dynamic between the three of them in that interview, because DiCaprio's costume comes in and he's kind of wants to get the job, but also isn't quite sure. And you can tell that Martin Sheen recognizes something in him, that he's very smart. And DiCaprio has that line of families are always rising and falling in America. And Sheen recognizes that it's some like quote. He's like, who says that? And he's like, Hawthorne. And Mark Wahlberg is great. He's like, what, you don't know any fucking Shakespeare? Like, it's not impressed at all. Doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, their dynamic is pretty incredible. I've always thought it was interesting how Sheen has to maintain composure the whole time, but he knows Wahlberg's role is to trigger like whoever they're bringing in to interview or just chat with. He's there to trigger it because they're trying to learn who's going to be a good fit, who's doing this.
Bad cop.
Yeah, definitely good cop, bad cop.
I just feel so bad for DiCaprio in this movie because his character never actually gets to relax.
Smile.
Even when he hooks up with the psychiatrist, he's still not relaxing. He's like,
yeah,
because he knows what he has to go right back to.
I'm so miserable. We're going to have sex with you anyway. Let's go.
Got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah. I love how Scorsese like subverts the like surveillance takedown scene from the acting point of view. Like the cops, Alec Baldwin, Mark Wahlberg, Matt Damon, and Martin Sheen all have kind of their own agendas in the scene, and the tension between them is really high, especially from Alec Baldwin complaining that the cameras aren't in the back, as he says. Whereas with the microprocessor deal in the warehouse, Jack Nicholson is really funny, taking the piss out of like the Asian gangsters. And even the way like the Asians are framed, there's this kind of like fake suspenseful look to it, like almost parodying this type of scene, whereas with the cops looking at the cameras, all of a sudden, all the suspense and tension is with them because Alec Baldwin is ready to explode on the tech guy, which of course he does.
Yes, which he does
in spectacular fashion. So I love that kind of subversion of where the suspense is in the acting.
Yeah, that's very true.
Can I talk to you over here for a second?
Yeah, I also love the parallel between, obviously, DiCaprio and Matt Damon's characters both have the same amount of deception and hidden motives that they need to do, as they're both moles in different organizations. And DiCaprio is incredible in this movie. But I think that Matt Damon's acting in it is honestly underrated because he has a lot of moments of, I mean, he's arguably the main character of the movie. You see him as a kid, he gets recruited, goes all the way to the end of the movie and the end of his life, basically. And he is manipulating everyone and does such a good job of kind of jumping back and forth to different sides, where is able to slip back and forth between characters of being a bad guy, being a cop.
Yeah.
And he does it so well. But I think most notably is the scene in the elevator where he's been arrested and he's trying everything. He's trying to intimidate him. He's trying to appeal to him. He's trying to convince him, oh, I'm totally a legit cop and not a mole, and I'm running this whole thing. You're an idiot. And then as he's not buying it, he just kind of starts breaking down as it sets in for him that what is going to happen to him if he actually gets arrested. Yeah, he starts to kind of break down. So you see all those different things as he tries to portray it, and he does so good in it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's very subtle differences as well. It's not like really obvious, like the differences in Matt Damon's acting, whether he's talking to his fellow cops or Frank Costello, and it doesn't feel like that devastating to him that like Costello is that he discovers Costello as an FBI informant. Like, there's nothing too dramatic there, I wouldn't say. So it's kind of brilliantly nuanced still.
This is one of those movies where, again, kind of like with Taxi Driver, where everyone just brought everything under their belt. They just laid it all out. I think the fact that Nicholson was a part of it, you know, actors always talk about when you have such an iconic person on set with you that you're working with, you're going to elevate everything that you're doing. I know Michael Clark Duncan used to, when he was still alive, used to bring up Tom Hanks in The Green Mile. Just saying, just working next to him elevates the acting.
Yeah.
What's crazy is when you have such a stacked cast that are all there elevating each other, it really comes across. And The Departed, as a whole cast, everyone you could argue is, oh, you're the main character, because everyone is just so incredible in their scenes. I love the acting in this movie. I actually have always kind of felt that this is like DiCaprio's best performance, because how tiring it is. So I've always kind of felt bad that he never got that kind of recognition for it. Because I'm like, dude, the guy is exhausting. It's a almost 3-hour movie, and you're still exhausted from watching him go through all the motions, even after he's gone, and the movie continues after. Like,
it can never let his guard down.
I feel like he shouldn't have won the Oscar for The Revenant, because I'm like, well, he's not really acting. He's just surviving in this environment, and they're just filming it.
It's just cold.
I absolutely love The Revenant too, and his acting in it. But yeah, there's other roles he has had that I've always been like, that's a stronger performance, and this is one of them to me.
Is he your favorite performance then, Dustin? DiCaprio?
He is my favorite performance in this movie. Yeah.
Jake?
I would say he's incredible. Jack Nicholson's incredible. Matt Damon, like I talked about, is incredible. Mark Wahlberg's also incredible. I have a hard time choosing between the four of them. And of course, every time I see Martin Sheen on screen, I'm like, God, I wish you were still acting in movies, because I love you in this movie. They're all great. I can't choose.
You can't sit on the fence.
Yeah.
I would say Matt Damon. I would say Matt Damon's character.
Cool. I can't really look past Jack Nicholson. Like, just really entertaining.
He's just so good.
He is.
He's just so good.
In just a psychotic way. Even in that little scene where he comes out in the bar and his hands are all bloody and no one says anything about it. It's just all normal.
it's just normal.
I'm like, guys, he's got blood on his hands. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, does anybody see this?
He clearly just got done like murdering someone in a heinous manner. How is no one responding to this?
I'm sure he took some members off of some people.
Right. Like, there are body parts probably just piled.
He clearly needed a new paperweight. So
Exactly.
I need the other guy's hand.
Yep.
Too much paperwork. So acting score for me, I think, this is hard, because I really like Taxi Driver.
Now, don't let yourself be like.
So I think I'll go with a
peer pressure.
8.9. I think it's
okay.
It's pretty solid. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think, like you said, this movie is all about the characters and their motives and the repercussions of it. That is the story mostly, and so the acting drives all of that. So I put it way up there at like a 9.5.
Yeah, this would be my highest score. I'm not going to give it like the solid 10, because I feel like solid 10s aren't really that attainable.
Yeah. Daniel Day-Lewis isn't in it.
But this one is very close. I would say this one is like a 9.6 for me. It's just so... Everyone is just so on point, and it draws you into the movie that 3 hours feels like no time at all, and it ends before you realize, and you're still trying to catch up and just process everything you just saw.
Yeah,
I love the acting in this movie.
So who's pulling rank here?
I'd go up to a 9.6. That's totally valid.
Okay.
Nah.
Right, let's add up the scores then for The Departed.
And can we just real quick say, when Matt Damon, after he's kind of getting away with it. And he's doing that interview, and he's like, I just want it on the record. I'm putting in for him to have the Medal of Merit. Every time he said, I'm like, you fucking piece of shit. Like, you're so, like,
He's so slimy.
The Departed wins with 54.4.
Hooray.
yeah.
I may win one of these episodes one day. My losing streak continues. I'm changing the rules for next episode. I'm picking the film first.
There it is. It's your show, man. You get to.
Put your thumb on the scale.
So Taxi Driver gets 52. So it was only 2.4 points in it, people.
IMDb has The Departed just slightly higher.
Oh, really?
8.5
Okay.
versus an 8.2. So it's pretty much what we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is crazy how close that is.
So next episode, as June Part 2 was supposed to be out around now, but will be out in March next year, I believe. So we'll be talking Timothée Chalamet films. So that'll be a good one. And hopefully we'll have guests for that one again from the Don't Be a Hero podcast. Guys, Dustin and Jake, you have been amazing. This is your opportunity again to tell us about your podcast, and where can we find you?
Yeah, find us on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, at Movie Bonerz with a Z, movieboners.com. And then our podcast is everywhere, YouTube, Spotify, all the things. But you can get to it through movieboners.com. And yeah, hope you check us out. It was a pleasure being here.
Yeah, this was a blast, man.
Cool. Right, it's time to say goodbye, people. It's goodbye from Dustin.
See y'all.
And it's goodbye from Jake.
Adios. Thanks a lot.
And it's goodbye from me. I think I need work on my Jack Nicholson accent, so I'm going to go away and try it again. Yeah, bye-bye.
Amazing.
Bye-bye. That was terrible. That's it for part 2. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 1 if you haven't done so already. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell us what your favourite films are relating to the episodes. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for Twitter at FVF_podcast. If you do, we'll give you a shout out on the next episode. If you're feeling really generous, you can buy us a one-off coffee at our Buy Me a Coffee account. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.